Have you ever noticed how a simple glass of water can just sit on your desk, completely ignored, for like 8 hours straight?
Yeah, just gathering condensation.
Exactly. The condensation drips down, it leaves that annoying ring on the wood, and you don't even glance at it. It's just, background noise. Your brain has basically categorized it as totally irrelevant.
Right, because in that moment, it is irrelevant.
So then take that exact same glass of water, right? Change absolutely nothing about it, not the chemical makeup, not the temperature, and offer it to yourself right after you finish a grueling, like, 5-mile run in the blazing July heat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that changes everything.
Suddenly, that boring glass of water isn't just water anymore. Your entire visual field just, like, narrows in on it. It becomes the single most valuable object in the known universe. I mean, you would gladly hand over your life savings for just one sip.
You really would. And we are looking directly at the invisible gears turning behind that glass of water today.
Yes, we are. Welcome to another custom-tailored deep dive. I'm your host, and today we are on a very specific mission for you as you prep for your boards. We are tearing into domain B.16 of the BCBA exam.
Which is honestly a concept that serves as the mechanical engine behind why humans do anything at all. Understanding this doesn't just, get you a passing score. It fundamentally shifts how you view behavior.
Totally. And today's material is pulled from a seriously dense stack of sources. We've got mock exams, study guides from BAS, and we are pulling really heavily from the absolute classic in the field, the Cooper text.
The holy grail of ABA.
Right. So our goal is to extract the most critical mechanisms behind identifying motivating operations, or MOs, and their precise effects on behavior.
So by definition, a motivating operation is an environmental variable that executes two distinct simultaneous functions.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Because it's a lot, I know. First, it alters the effectiveness of a stimulus, an object or an event as a reinforcer or a punisher. And second, it alters the current frequency of all behavior that has been reinforced or punished by that stimulus in the past.
Right. So let me just clarify for the listener, because it is so tempting to just brush off the term motivation as some, internal mystical state of mind. I'm just feeling motivated today.
Right, yeah. Behavior analysts do not treat motivation as a character trait or some mysterious cognitive cloud.
Exactly. Since we are looking at this through the lens of applied behavior analysis, we aren't talking about a feeling. We are analyzing a literal, observable condition in the environment that actively shifts your behavioral repertoire.
We treat it as a measurable state of the environment. Specifically, we're talking about states of deprivation or satiation. And the literature separates these into two foundational categories, right?
Unconditioned motivating operations, or UMOs, and conditioned motivating operations, the CMOs. So, starting with UMOs, we are obviously talking about unlearned survival drives. The Cooper text lists things like food deprivation, water deprivation, sleep, oxygen deprivation, and temperature extremes.
The basics.
Right, the absolute basics. But how does that physiological state actually translate into an environmental variable that alters behavior?
Well, the mechanism is biological, sure, but the manifestation is entirely behavioral. Take oxygen deprivation, for example.
Yeah.
You do not need a learning history to value oxygen. You don't need to be taught that breathing is, a good idea.
I would hope not.
Right. So the moment your environment restricts your oxygen, say you're held underwater, your body enters a state of extreme deprivation. That environmental condition immediately reorganizes your entire behavioral hierarchy.
So suddenly, previously reinforcing things like, money, social praise, or a delicious meal, they have zero value.
Zero. The value of oxygen skyrockets, and your body instantly emits every behavior in your repertoire that is historically resulting in getting air, thrashing, swimming upward, gasping.
Okay, so the extreme environment is the UMO that makes the air a highly effective reinforcer. But layering into conditioned motivating operations, the CMOs, I feel like that's where the complexity really ramps up.
It definitely does.
Because most of what you and I deal with on a daily basis isn't raw survival. I'm not usually fighting for oxygen. I'm just, trying to find my car keys.
Exactly. And that's where our learning history layers heavily on top of those basic drives. Conditioned motivating operations are learned.
Right.
They begin as completely neutral stimuli, but they acquire their value-altering effects through a history of, complex associations and experiences. The classic example in the text involves a locked door.
Oh, yeah. So imagine I need to get into my office. I walk up, turn the knob, and the door won't budge. It's locked.
Right.
In that specific fraction of a second, the locked door acts as a CMO. It takes a previously neutral object, literally just a small piece of jagged metal, the key, and suddenly imbues it with immense reinforcing value.
Because you weren't born with a biological imperative to seek out brass keys.
No, the value is entirely learned. But the environmental variable of the locked door actively creates the desire for that key in that exact moment.
Yes. The locked door, locking your access, is what temporarily makes the key an effective reinforcer. And furthermore, it evokes all the behaviors you've learned in the past to obtain a key.
Like patting down my pockets, digging through my bag, maybe tracking down the building manager.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You didn't do any of those things 10 minutes ago when you were just walking down the hall. The CMO shifted your behavior by altering the value of the key.
Which means making me value the key doesn't actually put the key in my hand. There has to be a mechanism that forces my body to move.
Right.
How does that desire turn into physical action? And I think that leads us straight into the two distinct effects of an MO. The sources hammer home that to pass this exam, you have to separate the value-altering effect from the behavior-altering effect.
You absolutely have to. Let's start with value altering.
Okay, break it down for us.
So the value altering effect dictates the current worth of a consequence. It operates on a spectrum, moving in two possible directions. It can increase the value of a stimulus functioning as an establishing operation, or EO.
Okay.
Or it can decrease the value functioning as an abolishing operation, or AO.
Right, so an establishing operation establishes the value. Food deprivation is an EO because it establishes food as a high-value reinforcer.
Exactly.
But flipping that to an abolishing operation, the mechanism just reverses. Like if I just finished eating an enormous Thanksgiving dinner, I'm talking turkey, stuffing, like 3 rolls.
You're completely stuffed?
Yeah. And then someone offers me a slice of pumpkin pie. The pie has zero appeal to me.
That physiological state of satiation, being completely stuffed, like you said, is the abolishing operation. It abolishes the value of food as a reinforcer.
Makes total sense.
If an experimenter tried to get you to complete some, complex cognitive task and offered you that pie as the sole contingency for completing it, your behavior would likely drop to 0. The reward has just been stripped of its power by your current environmental state.
Now, the sources mention a critical nuance here that I really want to make sure the listener absorbs, specifically regarding punishers. Because MOs don't just establish or abolish reinforcers, right? They alter the effectiveness of punishers too.
Yes, that is a fundamental rule in the Cooper text.
Yeah.
And it's one people trip up on.
So if we are looking at negative punishment like a timeout, which is essentially just the removal of access to a reinforcing environment, the MO for the reinforcer is also the MO for the punisher.
Exactly. You cannot use the removal of a stimulus as a punisher if the organism does not currently value that stimulus.
Right.
Think about a classroom setting. If a student is sent to the hallway as a timeout, that only functions as a punisher if the classroom itself is currently a highly reinforcing environment.
Which it isn't always. If the student is exhausted, confused by the math lesson, and just hates the ambient noise of the classroom holds no reinforcing value.
None at all. So sending them to the hall isn't a punisher in that context. It's actually negative reinforcement because you just allowed them to escape an aversive environment.
Wow, yeah. The threat of losing the classroom only works if there is an active EO making the classroom desirable in the first place.
And positive punishers operate under MOs as well. The presence of physical pain is an establishing operation for pain reduction.
So if you touch a hot stove, the pain is the MO that establishes the removal of your hand as highly reinforcing.
Yes, while simultaneously punishing the behavior of touching the stove. The variables are just deeply intertwined.
But again, value doesn't mean anything without action. Knowing that the stove burns or knowing that the pie is unappealing, it requires a behavioral shift. So let's talk about the second effect, the behavior-altering effect.
Right, because value translates directly into immediate action. And just like the value-altering effect, the behavior-altering effect splits into two directions.
Yeah, evocative and ablative, right?
Exactly. An evocative effect is an immediate, temporary increase in the current frequency of behavior. An ablative effect is a temporary decrease in the current frequency of a behavior.
I'm going to throw out an analogy here to map this out, pulling from the study guide. Let's talk about sleep deprivation. You wake up after getting maybe 4 hours of sleep.
Ouch. Yeah.
That state of sleep deprivation is the establishing operation. It drastically increases the value of sleep. That is the value-altering effect. But what do I actually do about it? I reach over and I set my alarm for 2 more hours.
Setting that action is the evocative effect. The MO didn't, teach you how to set an alarm. It didn't add a new skill to your repertoire.
Right, I already knew how to do that.
Exactly. It simply evoked existing behaviors that have historically been reinforced by getting more sleep. The EO established the value, and the evocative effect increased the frequency of the behavior aimed at acquiring it.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. We are talking about these mechanisms sort of abstractly, but BCBAs have to actively manipulate these invisible levers in clinical practice, don't they?
They do constantly. They aren't just sitting in a room observing behavior. They are orchestrating the environment to facilitate learning, particularly when teaching communication, like teaching man.
Right. Teaching a client to make a request is entirely dependent on motivating operations.
Completely. A mand is a verbal operant that is uniquely and directly controlled by an MO. A client will not ask for an item unless there is an active EO making that item valuable in that specific moment.
So if you are trying to teach a child to use an augmentative communication device to ask for water, attempting that training immediately after they drank a whole bottle of juice is scientifically futile?
Totally futile. The abolishing operation is in effect.
But waiting for a client to naturally encounter a state of deprivation is so inefficient. You can't just, sit around for 6 hours hoping they get thirsty, right?
No. Absolutely not. The literature shows that BCBAs actively engineer the environment to force an EO to emerge. They systematically contrive MOs.
Contrived MOs. Okay, tell me about the coffee trick. I read about this in the Cooper text, and it blew my mind.
Oh, the Hall and Sundberg study from 1987. It's a benchmark example. They needed to teach a deaf adolescent with autism to sign for hot water.
Right.
Handing the client a cup of hot water unprompted wouldn't generate a mand because there was no prior motivation established for it. The researchers utilized a transitive conditioned motivating operation, a CMOT.
Okay, let me test my understanding of this with another analogy. It's like playing a survival video game. You explore a dungeon and pick up a locked treasure chest.
Okay, I'm with you.
Before you had the chest in your inventory, a rusty key item was completely worthless to you. You would have walked right past it. But the moment you acquire the locked chest, the chest itself actively creates a massive desire for the key.
Yes.
The chest acts as the CMOT, altering the value of the key so you can complete the sequence.
That maps perfectly onto the Hall and Sundberg study. The therapist knew the client had a strong preference for instant coffee. So the therapist initiated a behavior chain by handing the client a cup containing the instant coffee powder, but intentionally withheld the hot water.
So the hot water is the rusty key in my video game analogy.
Exactly. The presence of the coffee powder combined with the absence of the water creates the CMOT. The coffee powder actively establishes the hot water as a highly effective reinforcer because the hot water is required to complete the sequence.
It's required to access the actual reward, drinking the coffee. That is brilliant.
It really is. Yeah. The contrived MO successfully evoked demand. The client signed for hot water. This illustrates a profound concept in applied behavior analysis. You do not passively wait for motivation.
You arrange the environmental contingencies?
Yes, so that the learner engages in the target behavior because it serves an immediate vital function for them. You interrupt chains, you provide toys that require missing batteries, you offer a bowl of soup without a spoon, you build the deprivation state artificially.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the listener staring down a complex, paragraph-long scenario on the exam? Because looking through the BAS mock exams, there is a very specific recurring trap here.
There is. It targets a candidate's ability to distinguish an MO from other antecedent variables. The most prevalent error students make is confusing a motivating operation with a discriminative stimulus, or SD.
MO versus SD.
Yes. Both of these are antecedent variables. They both occur prior to the behavior, and they both increase the likelihood that a behavior will occur. Because they share those characteristics, test writers constantly pit them against each other in the answer choices.
Let me take a swing at this because I feel like I've fallen into this exact trap before. If I'm driving down the highway and I see a glowing neon sign for a donut shop, that sign is the SD.
Right.
I see the sign, it triggers my memory of how good donuts taste, and that memory creates the desire to pull over. So the SD essentially functions as the MO, right?
That is the exact trap. The SD does not create the desire. The SD simply signals that reinforcement is available.
Oh, right, okay.
The glowing neon sign tells you, if you pull over and hand over money, a donut will be provided. It signals the availability of the contingency. But the sign cannot make you hungry.
Okay, I see.
The motivating operation, your physiological state of food deprivation, or how many hours it has been since your last meal, is the exclusive engine of desire. What's fascinating here is the SD signals availability, but the MO changes the momentary value.
So if I just ate an entire pizza right before I got in the car, I could see 50 glowing donut signs. The SDs are screaming at me that donuts are available.
But you wouldn't pull over.
Exactly, because the MO, the abolishing operation of satiation, has stripped the donut of its value. My behavior of pulling over will not be evoked. I drive right past.
To solidify this, let's look at the marathon runner scenario from the BAS mock exam. A runner finishes a 26.2-mile race. They are in a state of extreme physiological water deprivation.
The ultimate MO.
Right. That deprivation is the MO. It has exponentially increased the reinforcing value of water. The runner looks up and sees a water station 50 yards ahead. The water station is the SD.
Got it. The station signals availability. The cellular dehydration dictates the value.
They interact, but their functions remain totally distinct. The SD says, water is here. The MO says, I desperately need water. If the MO isn't present, the SD is functionally ignored.
You won't drink from a water fountain if you aren't thirsty, no matter how available it is. There's another layer to this in the study guide that focuses on escaping aversives, which is, honestly, incredibly relatable. Let's talk about the annoying boss example.
Oh, this is a great one.
So it's Saturday afternoon. Your annoying boss sends you a text message piling on 3 new projects due Monday.
Receiving that text message acts as the MO. Specifically, it creates a powerful establishing operation for escape. It makes the conceptual idea of avoiding work highly desirable.
But the nuance is your physical location, right? Let's say you were actually sitting at your desk in the corporate office when that text came through on a Saturday. You can't easily escape.
Right. The office environment acts as a stimulus delta and S delta. It signals that reinforcement, which is escape in this case, is not readily available. You're basically trapped.
However, if you are sitting on your couch at home when the text arrives, your home environment functions as the SD. It signals that escape is highly available. You can simply turn off your phone or ignore the message.
Exactly.
The text message didn't make the escape more available. I was already sitting on my couch. The text message made the escape desirable. It altered the magnitude of the desire, while the home environment signaled the availability.
Availability versus desire. SD versus MO. If a candidate can keep those parameters strictly isolated in their mind, they will systematically eliminate the distractor answers on the exam. That distinction is the linchpin of domain B.16.
Okay, we have dissected a massive amount of behavioral machinery today. Let's lock in the core takeaways for you, the listener, as you continue running your exam drills.
Good idea.
First, motivating operations are environmental variables that execute 2 simultaneous functions. They alter the value of a consequence, and they alter the current frequency of the behavior associated with it.
Second, the value-altering effect gives us establishing operations, which increase value, and abolishing operations, which decrease value. And remember, this applies dynamically to both reinforcers and punishers.
And the behavior-altering effect gives us evocative effects, which increase the current frequency of behavior, and abatative effects, which decrease it. Third, we explored the mechanisms of contrived MOs.
Right, specifically transitive CMOs, where an interrupted behavior chain like having coffee powder but no hot water is engineered to establish the missing item as a reinforcer,
which evokes the behavior of manding. And finally, the critical exam trap, separating the discriminative stimulus, which solely signals the availability of reinforcement, from the motivating operation, which actively drives the desire for that reinforcement.
Mastering these precise mechanisms is how you conquer domain B.16.
Truly. And if breaking down the science of behavior like this is helping you navigate your exam prep, we strongly invite you to continue this comprehensive BCBA study series with us. For more expert-level guidance, rigorous mock exams, and deep-dive resources, you need to follow Amethyst Therapy Services.
They really are the best.
You can access their materials at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or reach out directly via email at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
Having a structured, analytical approach to these concepts is what separates passing candidates from the rest. But if we connect this to the bigger picture before we close out this session, I want to leave you with a broader application to ponder.
Okay, I'm listening.
We've spent this time breaking down how behavior analysts systematically utilize MOs in controlled clinical settings to build functional repertoires. But look at the chaotic environment you live in.
You mean like the macroscopic view of motivation?
Exactly. Consider the algorithms meticulously designed to run your social media feeds, or the specific architectural layouts of the grocery stores you walk through.
Oh, wow, yeah.
These systems are constantly, quietly engineering artificial states of deprivation and satiation. They manufacture a fear of missing out, which is nothing more than a highly calculated, socially engineered, conditioned, motivating operation.
That is wild to think about.
It is specifically designed to alter the value of their content and systematically evoke your behavior, making you click, making you buy, making you infinitely scroll.
So they are actively manipulating your environmental variables to make you desire a stimulus you didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago.
Precisely. So as you close your books and go about your day, analyze your own behavior. What invisible MOs are actively pulling your strings today without you even realizing it?
Are you drinking the water because the fountain is there, or are you actually thirsty? A huge thank you to everyone for tuning in. Keep analyzing your environment, trust the science, and we will catch you on the next Deep Dive.